Hello, welcome back to Frame the Beat podcast, the show where we take a fresh insider look at the music industry. I'm your host, Dan Reed, and with over 25 years' experience behind the lens capturing the heart of the scene, this time I'm thrilled to be joined by the man that turned my dream into reality, the incredibly talented Chris Lopez. Chris has spent over 3 decades as a music and film photographer, shooting some of the biggest names in the industry. His work has graced award-winning films, TV shows, and captured countless iconic stars from the music scene. Hey Chris, how you doing?
Morning, Dan. How are we?
Not bad, thanks, mate. Not bad. What's going on?
What's going on? Well, it's 2025 already.
I know.
Amazing, isn't it, mate? I can't believe how fast the time is whizzing by at the moment. I think, remember my parents saying when I was younger that as you get older, it just flies by, and it's so true, mate. Honestly, it's just flying by.
It's exactly what you're saying, and I've spoken about it. I'm going through a little bit of a midlife at the moment because I'm quite fastly approaching the big 50, which I know you're over already.
Yeah, not
But,
much.
no, I know, well, a few years, but no,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
yeah.
love telling people. Even my wife's a little bit older than me, so I just at the moment I'm still in my 40s. But it's gone so quick. And to be honest, this podcast is for me and you is quite a great thing to talk about because how quick time has gone. If
Yeah.
you know what I mean. If people don't know, Chris was the man that gave me my chance as a music photographer. I've got some notes in front of me because we've got so much to talk about. But I mean, it was back in 1999. I've got one of my best friends is Phil Moonface Thompson. Now, Phil was the resident at John Digweed's Bedrock Night. Really good friend of mine. Went to all his shows and everything, and he had a press shoot. It was his first press shoot he's ever had. He got signed with John Digweed. He was absolutely buzzing. And he went up to London to the Sony buildings where Chris was. Phil had a great shoot. The shots still look fantastic. I always remember what you did with them in the middle of a street, wasn't it, with the lights, slow
Yeah, it
shutter
was
speed, with the lights in the background.
Charing
Yeah,
Cross Circus, I think, I
yeah. I
believe.
remember when I saw him and I went, oh wow, because I was into photography, but I was always the one that took my camera to a club. People go, oh, what are you doing? I mean, now they love it because obviously I was the only one documenting anything that we all did back then because obviously no one had phones and things like that. And Phil just mentioned to you about, oh, my mate's really into photography, and I was working in a clothes shop at the time and DJing. That's what I was doing after uni. If I'm being honest, I was stuck in a rut, just going out, clubbing, DJing and working in a clothes shop, which was all right, but it wasn't fulfilling for me. And you said to Phil, "Oh, just get him to give me a call." And I remember being quite nervous about it, thinking, "Oh, should I do it? Should I not?" And I did, and you just said, "Come up," and that was it. And I remember the first day for meeting you, Chris, was we were on a shoot with Reef, the band Reef, and it was in a hotel. I mean, you can talk about it more, but where was it? It was in a. Do you remember? It was a.
Charlotte Street Hotel. Yeah,
Yeah,
and we referenced the Beatles. You remember that old Beatles shop where they're all having a pillow fight?
yeah.
So that was the sort of reference. Charlotte Street Hotel was lovely. So yeah, we went over there and just basically had a pillow fight, which was brilliant fun, really, wasn't it? It was great.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, obviously,
Going back to that shoot with Phil, I mean
yeah,
Faith Thompson, that was such a great little shoot for me as well because at the time he was probably one of the first DJs that I started shooting. So I'd been, I was working at Sony, got all these bands coming through the door, a few DJs, but Lynn Cosgrave, who was running Cosmac at the time, she commissioned me to photograph a few DJs, and Phil was one of them for Bedrock. And we did that shoot down the middle of the street in Charing Cross, and slow shutter speed, blurred all the trailing lights behind, which was great. Yeah, and I'll never forget that shot. Actually, that shoot. And thanks to Phil, you came along, and the rest is history, really.
yeah, and I mean, what for me, because obviously I turned up with not knowing. To be honest, mate, I didn't even know aperture or shutter speed because I was using a compact Canon camera. I didn't have a DSLR
Yeah,
sorry, DSLR or an SLR. Then I didn't have anything. So to be honest, I learned everything from you and the other guys that were at the studio. Because I was sort of the second. There was higher assistants, weren't there? That obviously had been to uni or done experience and things like that. So I learned from scratch. I mean, I thank all my friends that I used their floors for years. I came up for about 4 or 5 years, didn't I? And I slept on friends' floors and just like
yeah,
came up and
you were quite exceptional, mate, because most of the other assistants that came through the door were all London based,
Yeah,
and you were travelling up from Southampton, weren't you?
yeah, yeah.
Which was, I mean, honestly, that was just way over and above the call of duty. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't
You
be
put
doing
the
what I'm
effort
doing now.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you put the effort in, and you made yourself invaluable, really, to be honest. And as far as the assistants go, there was quite a few that came through the 8 years that I was in the studio. And you were one of them, and you proved yourself to be amazing. And all of you are all doing really well as photographers now,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I'm pretty proud of, really.
No, no,
So
and you should be, because
yeah,
we had a good. Well, we'll get through it anyway. But
yeah,
let's start at the beginning for you, Chris, because you know I think at the moment I get it, and you still must get it, where people ask you about how you got into photography as
yeah.
yourself, and my story, which we've just said, that's my beginning in that sense. How did you start getting into? I'm looking at my notes now. What got you into photography when you were younger, and
Well,
did you study?
my dad was a keen amateur photographer. He had an Olympus sort of kit. He was shit at it, but it was really, he loved motor cars and things like that, and he'd always get the tail end of a car or the front of the car, but never the whole car in the frame. So he had all the kit, but no ideas, that sort of thing. And then my dad's cousin, he collected Photo Weekly magazine, and it's one of these TV advertised magazines, and he collected all of them, put them all in their binders, and then I think I must have been about 14 or 15 when he gave me this whole set of binders, 4 volumes of all this weekly magazine, and I just got sucked into photography. Really, I thought I was going to be a graphic designer. I loved art and design at school, and went to college to do art and design. And then, yeah, I left college a bit like you, really. I was a bit disillusioned with what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And I was doing a course at Amersham College, like a further art and design course. And every day I used to pass the photographic studio. And I used to think, oh, that looks good in there. What are those guys doing? And so I signed up to do a BTEC. Actually, no, it wasn't even a BTEC. It was a City and Guilds, I think. City and Guilds in photography, like basic photography. Did it for a little while. All my friends were in bands at the time. I was probably about 16, 17 at this point. A lot of my mates were in bands. I was a shit drummer. So that was sort of like, getting to shoot the band was the next best thing, really, I guess. And I remember, I think really the first big breaking point for me was photographing a band called Dirty Boots, who were friends of friends, and I went to shoot them at a rehearsal. And I remember taking a few rolls of black and white film and a few rolls of colour slide, and then I remember getting the contact sheet back the next day, and then looking at this black and white contact sheet, and there was one frame in the middle that just stood out amongst all the others, and that was it. I actually made the decision at that moment that I wanted to be a music photographer for the rest of my life. So that was totally a day that I can pinpoint in my early years that I made that decision, and I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I then got a job as an assistant photographer at Hamilton Photographic. I wrote to all the studios in the area, within a 50-mile radius. I think I wrote to every single studio. And luckily, the day that my CV hit the desk of the owner of the studio, one of the other assistants, Greg, who's still a friend of mine, he handed his notice in. So without him doing that on that day, I might not have got the job. So yeah,
So,
and that's how it started.
but for me, like, when you were younger, were you interested in for photography? I used to collect like novels of the movies that came out because I loved the covers, of the photography covers. Like there'd be. I remember at primary school, I'd like the Rambo novel. Do you know what I mean? They were like to my mum and dad going, "Why does he like this sort of stuff?" I didn't even read it. I just loved looking at the portraits and the pictures, and same
Yeah.
with vinyl. I used to buy stuff that never even listened to the record because I loved the cover. Were you
Yeah.
interested in that when you were younger? That
Yeah,
sort of thing.
absolutely. I mean, vinyl, all I ever wanted to do really in photography was shoot album covers. So, for me to come full circle years later and actually get the job at Sony Music, that was just incredible for me. You know, those were immortalized pieces of art, weren't they? If you got your cover, if you got your photograph on the cover, that was it there for the rest of time, hopefully, you know. So for me, that was a massive part of it, really. And now going into sort of film and TV stuff and shooting film posters, really, it's just an extension of that, you know. But yeah, cover artwork is why I do it, I think, really.
So you were in Amersham and you were an assistant there. Were you, you know, you learned obviously a lot there, and were you happy where you were, or did you want to build that? Obviously, you were, you know, we all want to expand, but what made you want to go for the Sony job? What made you want to sort of take that step? Because it is quite a big step. That's quite a
Yeah.
big move
Well,
up, isn't it?
there was a bit of a gap in between there. So I was at Hamilton's for 2.5 years as an assistant, and it was a big, very large. We had two large studios, drive-in studios. We shot a lot of cars and motorbikes, all commercial work, a lot of room sets for furniture companies and things like that. So we were building the sets, you know, decorating them and then shooting them. And yeah, after 2.5 years, I sort of started to pick up a few of my own little clients, like packaging companies and things like that. And I turned around to the boss at Hamilton's, Doug, and I said, "Look, I want to become a junior photographer." And he was like, "Oh, we don't do that here. You know, you'll have to go off and find another job somewhere." And I said, "Well, look, if I can bring in my own clients and I can pay for myself, would you consider it?" So basically, yeah, I did that, and I ended up making 3 times the amount of money I did as an assistant in that final year. And then I went traveling with my girlfriend. We went traveling for, you know, quite a while. We had a year visa in Australia, and then did some other traveling around Indonesia and, you know, Singapore and other places. And that again was another sort of big turning point in my career, I think, because I learned that, you know, with a camera, you could pretty much go anywhere and shoot anywhere. And if you had the sort of intellect to go out and find the work, you could make money. So I came back from Australia with after a year and a half of traveling around, and we spent all our savings. We went with about 15 grand, I think, but I made about another $5,000 when I was out there. So it was that was a big turning point as well. And when I got back from there, I had really itchy feet. I just didn't want to settle back in England. You know, I was doing some interior shoots for Neff kitchens and things like that. Very dull work. And so I got really itchy feet, and I read an article in the British Journal of Photography about a photographer that went to Belize as expedition photographer with Raleigh International. So I phoned them up, and the girl on the phone said, "Oh, I don't suppose you speak Spanish, do you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do actually. My mum's Spanish." So the photographer that was booked on the winter expedition in Chile in '97, we're in now, he had pulled out. So I had 3 weeks sort of intense training on an army camp. And then 3 weeks later, I was in southern Chile in the winter on an expedition with Raleigh, 118 to 25-year-olds, 35 staff, all trained staff. And it was another amazing sort of poignant photographic time, really, for me, because, you know, everyone was carrying big Bergens, big rucksacks full of all your gear and your food and your rations. And then I had almost the same amount of camera equipment to carry as well. So I was pretty much carrying twice as much as
And it was
everyone
filmed
else.
back then, obviously.
It was filmed back
Yeah.
then, yeah. So and batteries, you know, we're talking -15 to -25 sometimes, and you've got to keep your batteries down your pants and then pull them out when you want to shoot. Put them in the camera,
Were you?
shoot.
Was it a medium format, or was it
No,
35
that
mil
was
back
all.
then?
That was all 35 mm. Yeah, I had my
Yeah.
old Nikons back then. My film F2As. Had two Nikon F2As, which was, yeah. I think medium format would have been a bit of a big ask.
Even back then, you know, you're doing this in Belize, and you don't even know if the shots are good. In
No,
that sense,
exactly.
you know
Yeah,
what I mean? People
yeah,
nowadays are so, and I say to my
yeah.
girls, like, you know, oh, they've got phones and they can just see. But back then, it's the same doing a wedding or any sort of event back then. It's like
Yeah,
it's not pray because obviously you trust your artistic and your knowledge, but you never know, do you?
I remember somebody saying that to me. You know, like, what do you miss about the the film. And the thing I missed the most was the anticipation of film, and
I
being
like that.
able to shoot. Yeah, it was a
Mm.
it was a real moment because you didn't know what you had. You
No,
didn't know whether the film had got jammed or something had happened or there was a hair in it or
especially if it's a
you've
big,
ex-
big shoot, like
yeah
an
or
artist or something you're
yeah
never going to get back. You never can
exactly
recreate it.
yeah
Yeah.
exactly. And even shooting Polaroids to test the lighting and everything was a sort of way of checking it first, but you still didn't know. I mean, the Polaroids were way out off the mark from the film, you know.
Mm.
But yeah, no, that anticipation, that whole sort of like, right, you've got 4 hours, you drop your film off at the lab, and then you had 4 hours before you get your contact sheet back, So that was really that was the not it was the excitement really. It wasn't
Yeah.
anxiety.
I
It
remember.
was excitement. You
Yeah.
got so excited about seeing it, and then running down to pick it up, or you guys would pick it up for me.
So yeah,
Dan,
before we get
quickly go and get it.
to the jobs that I have to do, at Sony. So you're in Belize. How did you get to the
Oh
where
yeah,
we
Chile.
with Sony?
I
Yeah,
was in
Chile. So
Chile.
well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was in Chile. I did that for 3 months, and then I came back. And I shot. I actually, when I was in Chile, I took one of the first digital video cameras. It was a Panasonic DVB5, I
Got
think they
the
call it.
mini DV tapes.
Yeah, mini
Those ones. Yeah,
DV
yeah, yeah. I've
tapes.
still
Yeah,
got my Sony one.
yeah. So I took that with me. I think my dad lent me the money. It was about two grand to buy the camera
Mm.
because I thought, you know what, this has to be documented, not just on stills. It'd be great if I captured something on film as well. So I took that and I sort of basically shot a third of the people, like what are your first impressions of Chile, and then half the next third will be in the middle of the expedition, and I'll say how's it going so far, and then the last third of those people, I would film at the end saying give us the highs and lows of your trip. So I then cut this little documentary together. Really, I suppose it was rough. I wasn't an editor, but it was a rough cut. But I took it to Channel 4, and I said, look, I think Big Brother had just come out at the time, and I said, look, never mind Big Brother, we've got 118 to 35-year-olds or 18 to 25-year-olds in the middle of the wilds, some from social services in Glasgow for glue sniffing and some from Oxford and Cambridge University. And then you throw them all together in a pot and see what happens, and there were, people getting off with each other, people fighting, people
Wow.
bonding and making their lifelong friends, and it was amazing. So Channel 4 were really interested in it. And then at that point, I saw the advert for Sony Music in the British Journal of Photography. And I remember reading the ad. I've still got it somewhere. I've got a cutting of the classified ad saying, we want you to shoot our artists, album covers, single covers, in-store PAs, gigs, touring, the whole lot. And I was like, oh my God, that is my dream job. So I phoned up HR at Sony and said, look, what's the deal? And I remember the lady saying to me, well, you've only got 48 hours before we cut off the application for this job. So get your portfolio in as soon as you can and drop it off at reception. So I sort of cobbled this little 8x6 plastic wallet book. It was nothing like a
Not like
portfolio.
what we had eventually in the
Not like
yeah,
not like the leather bound
yeah,
embossed
yeah, yeah.
books that we had after that. But yeah, and I got to reception. I walked through the back doors, and there was honestly there must have been 300 portfolios from floor to ceiling, and I just chucked my little book on the top of this massive pile, and I just thought, nah, there's no way I'm going to get that. There were some incredible portfolios in there, and yeah. I got a call back. So I reckon my boss at the time was quite lazy, and he just picked the first one off the top of the pile and went, "Oh well, you'll be good. You can do it." And yeah, so I went back for a second interview, and I was really relaxed at the second interview. I remember because I almost had a ticket to go back to Chile with Channel 4 to do this documentary, or I was going to get this job at Sony. So either way, I was quite happy really. Yeah, And then luckily I got called back for a second interview at Sony, and I got the job. So
So it was in Great Mulberry Street.
that's right.
It's
Yeah.
not there anymore. We will talk about that later. And you, when I came up, and you told me, because this is a couple of years afterwards, I came up. You were the last in-house photographer, because a lot of music companies used to have them, and you had You had a studio in the middle of the building, wasn't it? It was sort of around the middle or the back. I can't remember.
On the back, at the back of the
Yeah,
building. Yeah. Yeah.
back of the building, and it was a studio, and it was pretty big, wasn't it? It was a good size. It
Yeah.
wasn't. The
Good size.
ceilings were pretty high as well. It wasn't
Yeah.
really like
Yeah.
sometimes you go to a London studio and you can touch the ceilings. It had a bit of height, but also
Yeah.
had a dark room connected to the side of it, which
That's
I always
right.
remember.
Yeah.
And you were probably one of the last, or not the last one. There wasn't many around. All the other companies didn't have them, did they? That was
Yeah, as far as I know, I mean, it was a real sort of 70s, 80s thing, wasn't it, really, to have a corporate guy or a staff photographer in-house who could shoot all the heads of the labels with the artists. And I think even now, I think I was the last in-house photographer worldwide for any major label. And I went to New York to meet my counterpart in New York in Madison Square Gardens at Sony. And I walked in presuming they had one, and they were like, no, we don't. We outsource to this other company. So I sort of realized, wow, I probably am the last one. And as far as I knew, Warner's didn't have one, or Universal, never had a guy. They all had them in the 70s, but after that, it sort of became something that was
And
more
what was your role,
considered a
Chris? What
luxury.
was your role when they gave you the job? What was your role? What did they say you would do?
Everything photographic, basically. So everything from shooting the heads of the labels, the CEO, international, UK, Europe wide as well, and then even album covers. If the band didn't have much money left in the pot, Chris, can you do it? Yeah, I'll do it. I mean, I took the job on very much, like I said, to shoot album cover artwork. That was my in. So I think the first thing I did as soon as I got there, I just went to every single label. We had Columbia Records, Epic Records, S2, all these separate labels within the company. And I just went and introduced myself to everybody. Even some people were like, "Oh, I didn't even realize we had an in-house photographer."
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, you do now."
Yeah. Who
And
was he in house for before? Well, who was he before? Was he a bit of an old school photographer? I think he was, wasn't he? He was quite old school before, wasn't he? And he retired. Was that right?
Baker was the last guy. Yeah, I mean, luckily, you know how brilliant a job is when there's been very few people in that position. So the first guy was Tom Sheehan, who ended up shooting all the covers for NME, and loads of Mojo and loads of Melody Maker, loads of magazines, music mags. And he's still going now, Tom. He's an amazing photographer. And then Terry Lott after him was there for about 13 years, I think.
Wow.
And Terry was very much the staff sort of photographer and was more about shooting the corporate side of it. And then Mark Baker was the guy that I took over, and he was there for about 9 years, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Mark was a really good photographer as well. I think we got, yeah. And when I took over, it was I made it my own. Really, I didn't care what the last guy did. This is what I was going to do. So I made a concerted effort and pushed people to get the juicy work. I didn't really care about the the corporate side of it. I did it, but I didn't really care much for it.
It's part of the job, wasn't it?
It was part of the job, and also, if even the smallest end of the job would be if a new person started a job at Sony, I'd have to photograph everybody that came through the door, and then that would be their announcement photograph when it went out on the email. And so even that, I think you realise that, one of the guys I think I remember shooting was Tom Connaughton, and Tom was an intern, I believe, or an assistant role at I think he was at Epic Records. Can't remember now, but he ended up being the CEO of Spotify. So,
oh, wow.
You've got to nurture these young uns, and hopefully one day, you'll get something out of it in the long run. And watch their career grow. It's just brilliant like that.
Do you remember what the sort of first major portraits you had? And because I remember when I was there with you, you did a lot of stuff in the evenings. You did a lot of like playbacks, listening, photography, and also a lot of gigs. You know, a lot of
Yeah.
shows. So, what was the first one? Do you remember that you went, "Oh wow, this is I'm here. Here we go."
I remember the first thing I had to photograph was a thing at HMV, and it was I think they called it the Truth Box, and it was it looked like a photo booth thing, a passport booth, and it was a video camera inside that you could go in and tell your truths, and it was for the Manic Street Preachers album that had just come out, and it was to do with that. So the first thing I had to photograph was a box. The first person I had to photograph was Gloria Estefan.
Oh wow!
So yeah, she was the
Didn't
first.
her son come? Because I remember he used to come down into the and have chats with us in the dark room. His
That's
son
right.
was there. Her son was there.
Yeah,
Wasn't it? Is that right?
naive
That's it. Yeah, he was
Estefan.
really nice,
Yeah,
wasn't he? He's a really
yeah.
nice guy. Yeah.
Well, I ended up calling my son Emilio because
Oh right.
his father was
Yeah.
Emilio Estefan.
Yeah.
And
Do you still speak to him? Do you still speak to him?
to naive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, occasionally.
Oh
Yeah,
right. Okay. Yeah.
he runs an open air celluloid cinema in LA.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So Gloria Estefan was your first shoot. You remember? You know, like major
Yeah,
sort of
and
thing.
I think that was just a disc presentation or something.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
gig.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything like that. I think it was just a disc presentation. I think the first portrait I did was Sean Mullins, an
Right.
American
Okay.
artist,
Yeah.
sort of country rock vibe. And that was great, actually. I remember getting the first print back from that, thinking, I'm happy with that, you know. And imagine going into a new studio with all this gear and all this equipment. And, you know, I was like a kid in a candy shop, you know.
So
It was
the
brilliant.
equipment was Sony's, wasn't it? So they had all the. You had your own Nikon stuff, but it was that, if I remember right, and you know we might be going a bit technical for some people, but there was a lot of medium format, and it was Mamiya's, wasn't it? RZs and
Yeah.
everything like that, wasn't it? And all the
Yeah,
lenses are all there and everything.
we had two RZs, Mamiya RZs, and then they had Nikon 35mm gear, and then loads of lighting. We had a load of Elincrom lights and load of old bron colour
all the
lights.
coloramas, you had everything. You could always order it in. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also
Conran leather suite as well.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And those huge speakers I had in there as well.
And also I remember as well being at that time, everyone smoked. Because you could walk around the building and everyone's just smoking in their desks because it was like you know before the thing. So I remember the dark everyone just was just smoking cigarettes. It was just a cloud sometimes, wasn't it? It was crazy. And obviously the rule came in throughout while I was there, but I just found it quite, now looking back, is mental, isn't it? But like everyone, there was an ashtray and everyone's like desks, so everyone's just smoking.
Yeah, that was the culture back then. I mean, some of I don't know if you remember on the labels. In the labels, they were very open plan, and then everybody had these sort of glass box offices off the side. So for some people, they'd sit in there and be smoking away, and it'd be like a hot box, it'd be just a complete room of smoke.
Yeah, it's crazy. And also the dark room. I just remember the dark room, and I can still smell the products. I can still smell it. And for me, I'd probably feel a little bit rusty now, but I mean that part of being the assistant there was, Devon Contact, doing the process of doing some prints for any of their labels, and if you were busy doing a shoot, you go, can you do 10 of these and things like that? And I learned how to dodge and burn, I think that was called, wasn't it? And all that. And I can see in the background now.
Yeah, there you go. Look, do you remember?
Probably one of mine.
Do you remember that bleed border?
Yeah. I used to love it.
Frame
oh my God, yeah.
Dave Grohl.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was such a special time, wasn't it? Even for me as well, because I hadn't, when I was at college and stuff, I did a little bit of processing, but I think I really did become quite a bit of a master printer in that time.
Definitely.
I really, and we could experiment, and we had a lot of, nice papers and good chemicals to play with. So I can
still smell those chemicals now. It's great. Yeah. Do you still do any darkroom stuff? Do you still shoot any? I mean, I haven't done it for years. I haven't got a film camera anymore. But
no, I think the last time I did a shoot was probably about 4 years ago on film, and I shot a guy called Macca Wiles, this rapper, and he wanted. I think you know what it is. I think it's just fashion, isn't it? Really, something is trendy. and people go, oh, I really like this, and it's like, well, you can just download the film grain and put it over the top.
It's pretty
And
good now, isn't it? It is pretty
yeah,
good. Yeah.
and also ultimately you're going to end up scanning it anyway.
Yeah.
So you take
Exactly.
a piece of film, you scan it, it becomes a digital file anyway. So why don't you just
Yeah.
start with the digital file and then,
Yeah.
work on it if you need
Um,
to, personally, but everyone's different. So
the other thing as well is that obviously, Great Mulberry Street is situated on the edge of Soho. I probably missed the glory days of Soho, but it's not what it is now. I mean, I went back the other week. And I couldn't believe it. I sent you a message. Went, where's everything gone? Even the
yeah,
pubs have gone. And I mean, I'm going to say it. One thing I did learn from being an assistant with you guys is a liquid lunch.
yeah,
My
we did.
God, you lot used to like a drink, and that's fine because everyone did. It was just like, oh God, we used to have. I mean, we were 3-4 pints at lunchtime. I was hammered sometimes. Do you know what I mean? It was just not all the time, but I just do remember there because it was quite social, wasn't it? That area, and there was a lot of people. I mean, I met a lot of your friends and colleagues and all that sort of stuff. I had a few friends that actually worked in the building as well, but it was a very social area, wasn't it? And I'd walk around Soho and see so many famous people back then.
Yeah,
It was mental. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think we did definitely catch the end of those really good days.
yeah.
I mean, it was pretty dirty and pretty sort of shitty at
Yeah,
that
yeah,
time,
definitely.
really,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah,
It was
yeah.
pretty
Quite seedy,
grimy
some of it.
and smelly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it wasn't as seedy as it was before that, but
No, no, no.
I think yeah, it was nice to sort of catch the end of that good time, really. And the pub, like you say, going out and that whole social thing, it was always, film companies, graphic designers, Stuart, who I met,
Yeah, yeah, Stu.
ended up becoming a partner in a company with myself. Stu,
They were
he was,
videographers, weren't they? They were editors, weren't they?
yeah,
Film.
they
Yeah,
did
yeah.
editing, and
And
they
Tristan as well, wasn't it? Yeah, I remember.
yeah, that's right. So they ended up, developing a system to take a screen grab, which you can do now off your laptop. But back then, to take a still from the TV wasn't really, it was in its infancy then. So it was, yeah, they sort of made a market from just doing that, really. Yeah, but
But
it was
yeah,
very social and just
yeah.
meeting everybody and going out, and it
And
was,
also labs. There were so many labs, weren't there?
yeah,
Like for
yeah,
development, there was about 4 or 5. I mean, so many. But now, is there any?
yeah.
Is there any in Slough?
There's still Metro is still in
Is
Clerkenwell.
Metro
The
still
big,
there? It's not in the
yeah.
same
Well,
place, is it? Next to Marks and Spencers?
in Clerkenwell.
No. There was one next to on our road, wasn't
Yeah,
there? There
yeah,
was
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Yeah,
That one went years ago. The one on Great
yeah,
Mulberry Street.
yeah,
But yeah, we had. I mean, my preferred lab back then was CETA. Good old
yeah,
Tony Window. Hi
yeah, yeah.
Tony, if
They're
you're
really
out
nice in
there.
there.
Yeah, and they were brilliant. I loved it. I loved going in there, and the pub was right opposite as well, so you could go in, drop
Yeah,
your film in, and then
yeah.
wait for 4 hours. That was at least 3 or 4 pints,
I
and
remember you
then
used to send me to Snappy Snaps. I always remember going to Snappy Snaps and picking up the Devon contact there
yeah,
and things like,
yeah,
or
that was
just,
that
or
was the
just,
that was the quickest place to turn around. Like a 35 mil roll. You
yeah,
could get it. You could get it turned around in about an hour and 20 minutes.
yeah,
So that was the quickest place. And if it was urgent, and then they wanted to, scan it and then send it off to one of the magazines, that was the quickest way to do it back then. I mean, now, people are running around with assistants and they drop the card off to their assistant. It's already at Getty by the time the gig's finished,
Wow,
you know,
some of them they actually shoot into
into
their
a
laptop
tethered
and it gets sent
laptop.
straight
Yeah,
away, doesn't it? Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, yeah, I
yeah,
know it's
yeah.
crazy, absolutely
Um,
crazy. So we were in Soho and everything like that, and one of the things I wanted to say is, I've taken on assistants. What made you do that? Were you allowed to? Obviously, you were allowed to do that, but did the other photographers before have that, or was it something
uh,
you just wanted to do?
I don't know really, to be honest. I don't know whether the previous guys did it or not, but for me, it was just volume of work. I was flat out. I mean, if you remember, there was probably at any one given time, you probably had 50 acts in that week. Say between 30 and 50 acts, UK based and then international in Europe. That you could be asked to call. I mean, some nights I was going off, I would be working all day in the studio, and then it would be like, right, go to this, HMV, there's Reefer doing an in-store or whatever. shoot that, then go to this gig, and then go to this after party afterwards. So, you know, I'd be in there from sort of 10 in the morning until get home at 4 in the morning the following morning. You know, it was like, it was crazy. So I really, the idea of bringing assistants in was, you know, to help lighten the load a bit. And, you know, I had a young family at the time as well. So, you know, being a rock and roll photographer wasn't conducive to family life, to be honest.
No
It was
way.
very difficult on my other half, you know, even though she worked at the record label as well. But it was, it definitely took its toll.
I remember I used to love tidying the studio because it was a mess, wasn't it? Which, because it was mental, wasn't it?
It was just busy all the
so
time.
many people coming in, but I
Yeah.
used to love to. I used to come in early and just tidy it up and just do it, and then it was like watching a mum, you know, like with a teenager, like and I think like 10 minutes later, come out and go, "What's the point? It's just completely gone again." It was just, but you know, that was part. I'm quite a tidy person, so I was just trying to do it, but.
A lot of the bands would come in and just, you know, chill out there because it was such a nice
Yeah, they
vibe,
did. Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
It was such a great vibe. So, you know, even if I wasn't shooting, you'd still get, you know, System of a Down coming in, and like in between meetings in the label, they'd come down and just hang out, or, you know, or Finley Quay or whoever it was, you know.
Yeah. I remember seeing who do we have in the? I mean, Paul Young came in once. I remember Charlotte Church when she was really young came in. Simon Cowell came in. Is that right? That was right, wasn't it? Yeah. It
No, I
was
mean
quite. It
the
was
number
mad,
of
wasn't it?
people the number of people that
Yeah.
we worked with in there it was brilliant. I mean, I think as my role, I was never going to get Beyonce coming into the studio, even though I did work with Destiny's, but that was always gig wise or meet and greets or other reasons, you know, but not really in the studio. But, you know, you wouldn't get people like David Bowie coming into the studio because
No.
he had big budgets to spend on Mick Rock or whoever he wanted. But
Did you ever
a lot of
feel
the other
like that you
bands,
could do it though? Obviously you could. So did you ever get that sort of feeling of like, come on, give me a go. Why don't you give it to me or something like that? Was there ever that sort of feeling?
yeah, and I think the first sort of big album cover that I shot was the Top Loader, Conker's Big Mocker, that first one. I mean, that sold 4 million albums, I think.
Yeah, I
So to
remember.
have that out there, and you know, people I remember people at Sony going, "Oh, did you shot that?" And I was like, "Yeah, you know, I can do that. I
I
can
can
do
do it.
any,
Yeah.
I could do anything Rankin does or anything anyone else does." It's like, you know, I think I was quite versatile, so I didn't really sort of create a style that was my own, because, you know, I could be working with jazz or rock or hip
Yeah, of
hop
course. You
or
have to adapt to everything. So yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
have to be a bit versatile. I couldn't just be one thing. It had to be a bit of everything. So, but I think, you know, as once people saw that at Sony, especially, and they saw that I could, you know, shoot cover artwork, they opened the doors a bit more, and then I got a few more and a few more and a few more. Yeah.
What was your favourite shoot you've done at Sony, portrait wise, and your favourite live gig
God.
at Sony?
I think at Sony, my favourite live gig, I always say to people, was the Bowie stuff that I did, because
Yeah.
he was my absolute hero, and you know, I grew up listening to his music. So really, he was the one that I just thought, you know, he was the most. Yeah, that was probably the most incredible moment, and that's probably just for me personally, not
No, but
really
I mean, yeah,
photographically.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's some iconic shots, even that Bruce Springsteen one in the background. I love that, you
Yeah.
know. So there, live wise, I mean, there's just so much really. Just have a look at my Instagram, pick your favourite.
Well, and
I'm,
also you've got to remember, which we were saying before, this is on film. So
yeah,
I'll do a live gig. If I'm doing a live gig, sometimes I come away if I've gone a bit trigger happy and gone, I've machine
yeah,
gunned that. I've done 900
yeah,
photos for the first 3
yeah,
songs. Back then, you had what, 3 rolls of film, if that,
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is another favourite of mine. I don't know if you can see that, but that's Lauryn Hill.
Yeah. I remember
Can you
that.
see
I
that?
remember that. Yeah.
And that was such a great gig. There was probably more photographers than I've ever seen in the pit anywhere in my life on that gig. And that was the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, the first night at Brixton. Probably 30, 40 photographers in the pit. I couldn't believe
Wow.
it.
And I know Brixton Academy is quite fit. It's not a
Yeah,
massive pit. Oh my
yeah,
God. And
yeah. It really was.
you have to get your position first. It's quite a get
Well,
in there
luckily
now, isn't it?
on that day, because I'd been with her and the crew through the press day, so I'd been
Oh,
out
okay.
doing
Yeah.
different radio bits with her. They had organised an interview with Trevor Nelson just before the gig, and I had to go and shoot that. So it was in this locker room, had lockers up, looked like a school. It was perfect for the miseducation, and they're both wearing brown leather, clothing in a brown leather setting, and their skin tones and everything. It was just beautiful. And I shot that, but I was really worried that I was going to lose my place in the pit beforehand. So luckily, the head of Sony was like, right, well, we'll put one of the security guards in the middle so that you can get escorted in and then stand where the guy was. All the other photographers are like, who the fuck is that?
So that was that. And I'd like to, we can't go past it, but talk about the DJs by Lopez book. So
of course, yeah.
Explain how that came about and what happened.
I shot a few DJs, again, going back to Lynn Cosgrave. I shot a few DJs for Lynn and
Trust the DJ, wasn't it? Wasn't it? Something like that.
Trust the DJ, yeah. That was the name of the thing that they were setting up at the time, the little label. So I'd shot, Norman Cook and Cole Cox and a few big names, Goldie and a few people like that. And I was trying to work out which shot to put in my portfolio. So what I used to do is lay the prints out on the floor in the studio and then look at them and go, which one should I put down? Which one should I take out?
And you'd ask us as well, didn't you? We all sat around, didn't you? Used to love that. All smoking.
Yeah. And I'll be like, okay, which one should I take out of the book and to replace with the new shot? And I looked down at the floor and I had sort of probably about 6 or 7 really big name DJs and, nice 11 by 14 prints all spread out on the floor. And I just looked at it and I thought, you know what? That's a coffee table book, So that's where the inspiration came from, really, to then decide to go and do it. And I wrote to loads of publishers, book publishers, and the first guy to get back to me was Cameron Brown from Collins and Brown Publishing. He'd retired from Collins and Brown and set up his own little publishing company called the Artists and Photographers Press Limited, AAPPL. And he got back to me straight away and said, look, I'd love to work with you on this project. So I remember him saying, how many DJs have you shot? And I was like, well, I've done about 60 already. And I'd only done about 6. So when he gave me a deadline of like about 9 months later to finish the rest of them, and I said I was going to do 100 portraits, I really shot myself in the foot a bit there. So I remember, some weeks we were having to do 10 DJs in a week, plus hold down my job at Sony.
And I think, and I'm not just saying it, obviously I came on as a bit more of a sort of getting people in, because obviously from my background of being in the music industry, dance music industry, especially at that time, I was definitely getting more like, working with a lot of, smaller DJs, but obviously knew the bigger DJs through that, like John Digweeds and, and Danny Howells and, and all that. So we worked together, didn't we? We worked together and I just, we blanketed loads of emails out to agencies and management companies, and everyone
knew
was brilliant.
The genre. You knew dance music, electronic music way more than I did. I think if anything at that time I was probably more akin to doing a rock book or something.
Completely.
Whereas you were completely into the dance music, and so it was brilliant to have you working on it with me as an assistant as well, because you could rap with Danny Rampling about the first ever Shoom record in 1988 or whatever.
It was good. I used to love it.
I couldn't do that. So, I used all of you guys like that in a way. It was brilliant because, like with Damien was another great assistant who was so tall and good looking. So any girls that I was shooting would just be swooning all over him. So he was eye candy for the girls. It was so each of you had your own little, your attributes that worked really well. And with that book, I couldn't have done it without you, mate. I mean, that book was was fantastic. And as a project, as a body of work, I've always been interested in, if you look, when you've got a career spanning 25 years like yourself, or 35 years with me, there's a lot there that you can't put it all in one sort of retrospective.
Completely.
I mean, I would love to do that now. I'd love to do a retrospective book.
I would love to do a book. That's one of the things. I mean, they're not like they were, are they? So it would have to be crowdfunded probably or something like that, to get a book done. There's not many coffee. I'd love to. And going on
Yeah,
from that, so the book came out. We did an exhibition at AKA, which was on. It was basically the bar of the End nightclub. That
that was
amazing
the
club.
that's the book launch. So we did
That
an
was a book
exhibition
launch, and they
there.
all stayed in there for a while, though,
Yeah,
didn't they? All the pictures. So we
yeah,
did a book launch, and loads of DJs came, didn't they? It was really good.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
fun, and that stayed online for that stayed there at the AKA for a while, and then for me, the probably the greatest accolade from that point of view is you were in the National Portrait Gallery as an exhibition,
yeah.
which
That
is
was
amazing. You know,
the highlight of my career. Definitely,
yeah,
I think
definitely,
one of the most incredible you know moments really to be offered a 3 month exhibition at the MPG. And at the time, I think they were very much trying to get away from the classical sort of painting, portraiture, and photographic portraits, and go into something a little bit more youth culture. So yeah, they approached me to do an exhibition there. So that came through the publisher. So
oh, okay,
Cameron Brown had knew the curator there, and then
yeah,
he had mentioned the book, and they said they took 21 images from the book
yeah. Do,
for
do
a
they
three
do
month
they pay
exhibition.
for? I don't know what it is, but do they pay for the framing, or is it do you have to all do that?
No,
If you know what I mean?
they pay for everything. So
Right.
up
Okay.
front, and then
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that shot of Danny Rampling that was shot
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah.
That became the poster. So
Yeah.
outside the National Portrait Gallery was this huge poster hanging down. Yeah, it was
Amazing.
brilliant. Yeah,
So that was probably around 2002, wasn't it? I think around that time. Tell me
yeah.
what happened with Sony. What happened because
So
you're yeah,
the book came out we shot it in 2002, and then
yeah,
2003 the book came out,
yeah,
and then in 2004 Sony merged with BMG, and BMG had never had an in-house photographer or staff photographer, so they didn't really sort of they couldn't get their head around the extra headcount and all of that. So at that time, I took voluntary redundancy, basically, and it's probably one of the best things I ever did, really, to be honest. I mean, all the music industry is such a small industry, and everybody would be going around working for other labels and other companies, and so it freed me up to go and work for other people, which was great, yeah. So that was great. That was another moment in time.
so you
I
could
did,
work for other labels then instead because you weren't
yeah,
allowed. You weren't. There must have been a contractual thing of you couldn't
yeah.
work if someone you knew in another label went, "Oh, come and shoot this live gig." You weren't allowed to do that, were you? At
No,
Sony,
no.
no.
I mean, it was you were very much stuck with what you were doing.
Yeah,
I mean, I did the odd bit here and there for other friends who were working at other places, late at night or doing my own thing in my own time. But yeah, no, for me. I think I got quite complacent after 8 years there, and
it's easy to do, isn't it?
I was
Yeah,
ready to sort of move on and further my career in doing other stuff really as well. Um,
yeah.
so at that time, I then went freelance and sort of set myself up with the redundancy money. I bought some new kit and did all that. Wasted so much money in Soho on rents and studios and stuff like that really I didn't need, to be honest.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
think, oh yeah, I'm this great photographer, I'm going to splash out on a studio and do all of that, and really I didn't need it.
So you left Sony, and then you went to freelance and things like that. What about so you got into video then as well a lot more?
Yeah, I mean, at that same time when I left Sony, I didn't want to see the 8 years worth of stuff that I shot go to an Iron Mountain facility. So I did a deal with Getty Images. I
Oh yeah,
wrote to Getty and said, look, I've got this archive. I'm sat on an archive of images from it's Sony's archive, but I'm sat on it from 1974 right through to 2004. Would you like to do a deal? So I got paid basically for 3 days a week to go into the Holton archive, where Getty's main archive is held in London, near Ladbroke Grove. And I brought the other photographers in, the three other guys that were at Sony and had held that position as staff photographer. And I brought them in to caption and date some of the choice stuff that they'd shot. and they're still making money out of that now, out of that project. So it still generates a little bit of revenue every year.
Do you know what, Chris? Actually, you mentioning that is in my notes, and I do speak to a lot of photographers about it, and it's something that the older we get is, and don't want to bring the mood down a little bit, but what are your feelings about when we pass away with your work?
Yeah,
Because I think it's quite an important thing to talk about, because I know
it's
a
a
few
very,
people that have passed away,
yeah,
photographers, and that's it. Their hard
yeah,
drives have got gone.
yeah.
They've got no family.
No,
In that sort of sense, they don't know what to do with the things. It's something we
yeah,
need to talk about in videographers
yeah, absolutely. It's a massive thing. It's like sorting out a pension, really. If
yeah,
you don't get your pension sorted out early, yeah, why would you leave that for someone else to sort out? It's a
yeah,
minefield. And if you don't know, I don't know about you, but I've been really crap at captioning and dating everything and putting it all in organized folders so I know where everything is. A lot of it, especially the early film stuff, it's all just in A4 envelopes with scribbles on it.
yeah.
It doesn't mention the venue, doesn't mention, the date properly or whatever. So, yeah, so well, lockdown for me was the time when I started doing all of that because I was, I wasn't shooting, there was no work about, and it was I had been carrying the weight of and the gravity of that whole thing on my shoulders, thinking, God, when am I ever going to sort this out? And actually, it happened to my dad's cousin who died, the guy I said at the beginning who was a real influence in getting me started years ago. They didn't have any kids, so they went around the world shoot, and he had a really, he had a fisheye lens back in the early '60s when
Wow.
not many people
No.
did, and it's got a beautiful shot of a yellow cab with the Empire State Building behind it, and it's all in one fisheye
Wow.
shot.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And so when he passed away, they opened up this chaise longue in his spare room, and there was 6,500 colour slides underneath.
Wow.
And my dad went, "Well, you're the photographer. You sort it out."
So what do you
So
do with that? Because that's what I'm saying is that it's all very well, we've got them on a hard drive, we know where it is. You've
yeah,
got, I mean, obviously the Sony stuff, there's obviously a little bit of there's copyright stuff that you don't own, but there's a lot of stuff you do own that we've not signed. I've got a lot of, stuff that I've worked with a lot of artists and things from a long time ago. But what are you going to give it to the kids? Are you going to try and sell it to a record, a Getty or a Rex or
so
something like that?
what I'm doing at the moment is after lockdown, I got a lot of the old film stuff scanned, which was great,
Yeah.
and then that's now organised onto our hard drives. It's all been captioned and dated. So the next step really is now to catch up with the digital stuff since the film days,
Yeah.
and then get it all together. And I'm probably looking at about, I don't know, 12,500, 13,000 images. And I'm just going to go to Getty with the whole lot, or a syndication company, and say, look, here we go. This is my archive. Would you like it? I mean, Getty have already said yes. In principle, they'll take whatever I've got.
And then it goes to the
So,
kids when
and
we
then,
eventually
well, yeah,
go, is it?
your copyright is 75 years, isn't it? So from the date
Yeah.
you shot it, it's lasts for 75 years. But if you,
Oh, is
it's
that
like
right? Is that right? Is
yeah.
it? So
But
after
if you don't,
75 years, who owns it? Anyone?
anyway, it goes into the
Oh,
public domain
wow.
after 75 years. But
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
so
That's
so
mad.
but you have to have that in your will. So
Yeah.
you have to write a will to say this is going to go to the kids, or it's going to be named. You have to name somebody. If you don't name somebody, then it could just be swallowed up in the ether.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't, and how do you track that if somebody's using it? It's like, it's an
Especially
impossible
digital
task.
nowadays, isn't it? It's like you
Yeah,
put something up.
and I
Yeah.
would never wish any of my kids the enormity of trying to sort it out.
Yeah.
It's like it would take them years just to
Yeah.
try and sort it out. You
It's
remember my friend Henrik who died. So
yeah. Yeah.
it was the same thing with his brother. He had so much. He had DAT tapes. He had hard
Yeah.
drives. He had spools of real music on spools, on tapes, and he had so much of it. And it took his brother 4.5, nearly 5 years to collate it all and get it into a format that was then, sort of
Yeah.
archived properly. So
I think this is definitely something that we all need to start talking about, because especially with the digital stuff, because there's so much out there. I mean, I've got, you know, nearly 20 terabytes of bloody work,
Yeah,
if you know what I mean. It's
yeah,
like, it's crazy of,
yeah,
you know, and I do think about it because I'd hate to not. Look, I'm hopefully going to be around for a lot longer, but what I'm saying is that we've got a lot of history in the music industry that I don't want to just be lost.
mm.
If you know what I
And
mean, you know,
also
because we're
the other
very
side,
lucky to be what we photographed. If you know what I mean, so
yeah. And the other side of it is that you're constantly working. So when do you get the time to do it? You know,
yeah,
if you're on to the next job, you haven't even properly archived the one you've just shot.
yeah, I
You
know.
know, so I mean, I don't know how you do it. I've got years, so I do everything by
Yeah,
years.
I've
So
got years. Yeah,
2025,
yeah,
that's what everything I've shot in 2025 is
yeah,
in
me
one
too.
folder,
Yeah,
and then each one within that, often, you know, you
I have
wouldn't,
live, portrait, corporate, you know, in that, so it's all
yeah,
separate. But
yeah.
it's definitely
Yeah,
something we
but
need
it's a
to talk
good thing
about.
to sort out, and I think a lot of people need to sort it out because you know it's just a otherwise it gets, you know, that, like I said with Ron, my dad's cousin, 6,500 slides. I mean, I pulled out maybe about 600 that I went through every single one, looking at them on a little light box with a magnifier and going, yeah, I'll keep that, dump that,
So
keep
what
that,
are you
dump
going to
that.
do with those though? That's what I mean. Is there any way you can make, not say money,
Well,
because I don't want to be crude
yeah,
in that
at the
sense, but
moment, no, it's not. It's not to make any money. I just wanted his shots to go out there because I thought they were
yeah,
really good. You know,
yeah,
I did contact Getty about them, and they were like, "We've just got so much, we can't even take it." You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
they've got so much stuff. You
yeah,
know, I mean, the only thing that I think the relevance on those early sort of '60s shots of, you know, he's got shots of Madagascar in the '60s and places that weren't really easily
yeah,
accessible,
mm,
you know, or photographed. So film companies buy those to get the styling right and the wardrobe and the cars and everything. They're the companies that will actually, you know, moreover than anybody else, be valuable to them more than anybody. So that's something to think about. But it doesn't really have a monetary value. I think it's just keeping it in there for prosperity.
Okay, so when you left Sony, I just remember back then that I was quite early buying into digital cameras, if you know what I mean. And I think you were a little bit later, weren't you? You took well, not long, but I had a 10D, which was like 6 megapixels or something like that, a Canon. But how did you transition? Because there was a lot of photographers at the time going, "Oh, we're not into this digital. This won't, you know." I love it personally. Absolutely love digital. It's my favourite way of shooting. So
Yeah, I mean, I loved it as well. Really, to be honest, I mean, I going back to my Hamilton's days as an assistant, the whole people were talking about going digital back then, and a lot of photographers were actually, you know, jumping ship and getting out of photography. A lot of the old boys because they just couldn't handle
yeah,
the
that's what
thought
I'm
of
saying. Yeah.
they couldn't handle the thought of going into the digital world. But I think it's just progression, isn't it? Really, and for me especially, it was something that I had to embrace. And you know, and I loved the you know, the instant availability of the shot. You know, just to be able to see it straight away was, you know, no more Polaroids, no more waiting for the film and stuff. It just sped everything up completely, and I really liked that. You know, it was yeah, being a busy photographer and going from job to job, I could squeeze more jobs in. You know, so that was definitely a big plus for me. You know.
What do you think the role of a music photographer has evolved in the last decade or just over since?
I think the social media side of it has changed everything.
How are
From
you with that? Because that's one of my
um,
things on the
I
notes.
don't, yeah, it doesn't really affect me that much, to be honest. I mean, I don't offer it. I don't offer, you know, I'm not a content creator for social media. I'm a photographer, and if you're the content creator, then take my content and create.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't, you know, I don't go out as a content creator. I mean, I can shoot video. To be honest, these days I can make more money and get way more satisfaction than, you know, if I produce and direct video rather than picking up a video camera and shooting. You know, I mean, I still do. I did a video for an artist called Jake Emlyn last year. It's the first thing I've actually physically shot on video for ages, and I loved it. I loved the whole process. And for that video, that was a promo for him, and I wrote you know, I listened to the track, I wrote the promo, I shot it, and then I edited it, and I put it out there. I graded it and put it out, and I loved that whole process of going back to my sort of early days of doing all of that. But I think, when you realise that, your day rate's your day rate really as a camera op, whether you've got a stills photography day rate or a camera op, a video day rate, you can only ever earn that money. But as a producer, if you're putting sort of something together with 10 different cameramen and editors and, whatever, producers and everything, you can make more money doing it that way.
Is that something you'd look into? Is one of the other things I think about is like, especially doing like what we do with music and everything. Will you still see yourself in when you're 70 being doing a show, or would you rather be? I mean, I don't. I love shooting music, so I'll hopefully, if I'm fit and healthy, I'll do it as long as I can. But what will you look? Would you rather do the producing side of it then?
Yeah, I mean that's. I'm always looking at other. Going into film and TV was another sort of step forward for me. That's something I love.
And what's that? Let's talk about that now quickly. So if you've gone from Sony, you've gone into that, and now you've gone into like film and TV, which is also video as well as stills, isn't it? You've been doing bits and pieces behind the scenes stuff as well, and all that.
To be honest, again, it's more stills only. Really, I do shoot the EPK they call it when you go behind the scenes and shoot a lot of the
quite
interviews.
I quite like doing that. Yeah.
It's something that I've the thing is though, it's like years ago you used to get paid to be a unit stills photographer, and then now they would almost expect you to shoot the EPK as well, but that used to be somebody else's job years ago. So why you would do two of them, two things at once and only get paid for one of them, it was difficult. So I would always say no. If you want me to do both jobs, you either pay me 2 fees to do it or get somebody else to do it. How can you concentrate on shooting stills and video at the same time? They're two different bits of kit and set of kit as well. You need microphones, you need, XLR leads to take the sound from the
and
desk.
Things like that.
It's all of that. It's a whole different job. And I always say to people, look, if you want somebody to do both, then go and hire a kid who's 18 and can work both, But I guarantee you're not going to get the same quality that you would have if one of us did it and then you have another cameraman doing the other side of it as well. So that's where I come in, and I'll say, look, I'll bring in a cameraman. So it's a crew of, it's 2 people to do this that you think you can get done for one person. And I challenge anybody.
I think we've talked about most of the things I wanted to talk about. Is there anything you want to sort of, what's the future hold for you? What are you looking at to, sort of the next few years?
Really,
Lopez.
just carry on doing what I'm doing, because I feel, especially now at this sort of time in my life at 55, I've got 4 beautiful kids. I've got an amazing partner, girlfriend, DJ, who's out there, and she's and I think I've come to a point in my life where I'm very happy with what I'm shooting, and I'm very content with the work and the quality that I'm putting out. I think I'm probably doing the best stuff I've ever done, really.
That's good.
At this time. And I think for the future, I'd love to, I've always, you remember me banging on about the psychology of photography and like this little book idea that I had years ago, and it never became a book, but maybe it'll become something else in some other light, maybe do some retreats around the world and have photographic retreats where people can come and join me on a week or a few days, learning portraiture or learning, everything.
Would you like to do that? Really? Would you like to get into more teaching sort of stuff? Or
I think I've got to that point where I'm old and wise.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I've always been, that person who loves, like with you guys, with all of you guys that came along, I loved imparting my knowledge and sharing my knowledge with you guys. And,
well, you come the grey hair now, mate. You're getting that sort of
the silver fox. I think
it's quite funny actually. Going back, and I didn't mention it before, but I've gone through loads of Polaroids. Obviously for YouTube and Spotify, you can see them, but for Apple, just try and have a look of whenever because I always used to be like if people want to know is when you did a shoot back then with medium format camera, you used to use Polaroids to see what the lighting was like. So you have a light meter nowadays, obviously digital. You don't need any of that, but it was quite funny that I always used to be like the model, and because as I was a DJ, I'd try and do my like DJ, sort of cool looks in each one. I've got hundreds because you look, obviously you didn't want to keep them. But what I couldn't get over in the short span of time is how different my facial hair was each time. I've got an Ali G, I've got a Brazilian strip in my chin, just that, like
Yeah.
a beard, like a real big thick goatee. My hair, I had like highlights. At one stage, I had that awful David Beckham mohawk that he had.
Yeah,
Like,
I remember.
oh, mate, I'll put them up on these. I shouldn't really, but I thought I'd scan some. They're so bad. It's such a time capsule, things like that, looking back, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at me now, mate. Mullet. I've got a mullet and the grey hair and the moustache.
Ash.
I really do feel more confident and more myself than I ever have done, really.
What would there be before we get to the listeners' questions? Any advice would you give to a photographer, a young photographer coming out of school or college, or I didn't go to uni, so any of those sort of mediums? What would you?
Don't do it for the money. It's the first thing.
No,
you're not going to make much money anymore. I mean, the market's oversaturated. To be honest, it really is.
Is that because of digital?
I was so lucky. Yeah, I think so. I was just so lucky to start when I started in the late 80s.
I think me too as well. I think even then I was quite lucky to start then to build up.
Yeah, but I would say, if you want to be a music photographer, just get out there and shoot as many bands as you can. It doesn't matter if the band are famous or not. Just start somewhere and get access to the bands. I mean, now with Instagram, you can message anybody, can't you? So get out there, hassle people and hustle and get the jobs in, and build a portfolio, and then just punt yourself out really after that. But don't do it for nothing, kids, because it's ruining it for everyone else.
That's true. Right, so let's have some questions from listeners. We've got about 10 minutes left. So the first one's from Toby. The most famous person you have met?
David Bowie.
Oh, wow. And what was he like? Was it a quick hello?
No, I did 4 dates with David Bowie, so I did get to sort of have a little chat with him and stuff.
Yeah.
And
was he nice? Was he aloof, or was he just nice and nice?
No, he's quite shy actually, and quite sort of introvert. Really, for somebody that can be so extrovert out on stage. But he was for me, he was my hero, and I think if I've ever been sort of a bit gobsmacked by anybody, it was probably him.
Well, going on from that, and I can imagine this is probably the one because you spoke about your favourite gig you've ever photographed, and that's from Steve.
Favourite gig I've ever photographed? I mean, there's been so many, mate. Really, I think one of my highs was Glastonbury 2000, and it was everybody that I shot at Glastonbury over the weekend. It was just amazing. It was Friday night, Macy Gray, and I was on the back of stage, looking out over that massive crowd of people. Yeah. And then we had Reef and all the other bands that I was shooting over the weekend. It was brilliant. And that was such a...
That film as well, again, so you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah. And I did do a little sort of video diary of that weekend. So I've got a lot of that on, a lot of the mischief on film.
Right. Okay, from the gentleman of this one, if you could photograph a musician or band alive or dead from history, is that right? Or alive or from history, whatever, who would it be and why?
God, who would I like to photograph? I think Led Zeppelin I always would have loved to have shot, I think, really. Scarlett Page, did you ever meet Scarlett when she came into the studio? Yeah. So that's Jimmy Page's daughter, and she obviously had some amazing photographs of Led Zepp that I would love to have had myself. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, for me, I think... who would it be? I was a massive George Michael fan, so I'd love to have shot George in the Fate era.
I photographed George once.
Yeah, I remember you were lucky to do that, And I think for me, I would Jim Morrison back in the day, mate. Yeah. Those 70s sort of.
Yeah. Well, I did that Hernan Catania shoot.
You did, yeah.
That was that was a homage, my homage to Jim Morrison.
Yeah, I remember that. RAW or JPEG from Ethan?
RAW all the way. Yeah, you can't compress something straight away.
You ever shoot JPEG or just no?
Never shoot JPEG. No, unless it's sort of something somebody's birthday party or something. Something personal. I would shoot JPEG.
Yeah.
If it's if I'm being paid for it, I'd always shoot RAW.
Yeah. Smartphone at gigs? ?
What, as in,
Do you
do they
like
annoy me?
yeah? What's your feeling on
To be
smartphones?
honest, I don't really mind, to be honest, because I think, it's one of those things that people love, and we're now in the world of getting everything, on Instagram and Reels and doing all of that. So I sort of get it. I think, what they should do at concerts, really, if people are getting fed up with it. I mean, I've even had somebody tap me on the back before when I've been a punter, not even shooting, but tap me on the back and said, "Mate, I don't want to look through your screen all night." It's like, well, sorry, mate, everyone else is,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
but I think maybe they should bring in the first three track rule again and just
That's a
say,
good
look,
idea. First
yeah,
three, you can use your
you
thing
can
and
use
then
your
everything
phones,
away.
first three tracks, then put them away. If you do get found using your phone, you'll be out.
Yeah,
Or even the first and last track, because the last track's always great,
yeah,
as well. But I
yeah.
don't know. It's one of those things. It's down to the venues, isn't it? Really. I mean, I do get it. I get it that people are getting fed up with just looking in the back of people's screens. But
Yeah,
it's the world we live in.
definitely. What photo? This is from Nick. What photo would he like to be buried with? You can only choose one.
Oh, that's so hard. But you know what? Do you remember me talking about the first shot that when I shot Henrik and his band?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Then I would probably say that image,
yeah.
because really that image for me is the most important image in my archive.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's the first time I realised I wanted to photograph music for the rest of my
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
So I think for me, they're not a famous band, but for me, and it's got a lot of other personal reasons
yeah,
that
yeah. Of
why
course.
as well. But I
Yeah.
think that for me is probably the one I'd like to be buried with. Yeah,
Nice.
and a picture of my kids and my lovely
Of course.
girlfriend.
Yes. Right. Last question. What celeb which celeb you've snapped was the craziest? If you can give, and that's from Simon.
Oh my God, I mean, I've had some crazy System of a Down were
Yeah.
crazy.
Did you have the snake on them? Was it them? You had the
No,
snake.
that was Minas.
Oh, that's
Actually,
it. Yeah,
Minas.
yeah.
They were an Icelandic band. They were pretty crazy as well. Cypress Hill were pretty crazy. There's been a few crazy ones, but I've never really had any sort of like major, sort of dilemma with anyone or anger or anything like that going on. Michael Ball was a little bit difficult when I photographed him, just because he put on a lot of weight since the last shoot. So he didn't like the Polaroids that I was just,
And that's
peeling
hard,
back.
isn't it? Because I've had that before where, when you start, and obviously I tether now into capture, and
Yeah,
like when you get the first one, they go, and you think, oh,
yeah,
God, I've been setting this up for
yeah,
now. Well, why you've been in
yeah,
makeup?
yeah. That's why
Or,
I hate tethering. Even now, I hate
yeah,
shooting it. I hate
yeah,
shooting into the computer. But yeah,
yeah,
I mean, to be honest, yeah, I've not really. Some of the most challenging people. I did Shirley Bass's Greatest Hits cover, and she had walked out on a shoot before I
oh my
shot her
God, really?
with someone else. She walked out of the studio, and they didn't get on and stuff. But I got on really well with her. It's just, I think you can be
You did
sometimes.
Tony Bennett as well, didn't you? You did Tony Bennett.
Yeah, I've worked with
Yeah,
Tony Bennett and Andy
yeah,
Williams and a lot
yeah,
of a
amazing.
lot of the great crooners.
Yeah,
But I think I think my approach is always to be the nice guy, really,
yeah.
and I can get the best out of people,
Well,
like
I think
that if
that's
I.
and obviously learning from you as well. Back in the days, with we won't talk about some of the things I ended up saying using your using your
Yeah,
catchphrases.
I,
You
I,
caught me
I
once
remember.
doing it. We won't talk about that because we said that the other day. But
Yeah,
basically, I used to
get
say
your own
things that
lines.
Chris used to say to get laughs, and you came in once, didn't you, and heard me say one, didn't you? Don't say it
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
so embarrassing.
No,
But
no, no.
it was and that's what I learned from you. But what I was saying is
Yes.
that um, I think a lot of the being a photographer, especially portraits, is making your subject at ease. That's
Mm,
probably 80%
absolutely.
of it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Especially DJs who I work with, a lot of DJs and producers. They're not models. They're not rock
No.
stars. They're not like So it's getting that connection with your subject, isn't it?
Yeah, and even I mean, if I only get 20 minutes to shoot somebody, I'd still sit down with them for 5 minutes and look at them, observe their mannerisms and how they drop their head and how they use their hands and their arms and stuff. And then I'll use some of those things that I've observed into the shoot and said, oh, when we were chatting, you did this. Let's do that. Or you can ask somebody what they're into. I mean, I did a shoot with Regina Spektor, and I said to her, "What are you into?" And she went, safety pins and safety clips. And I was like,
What?
oh, okay, yeah.
We haven't
What do
got
I
any
do
of
with
them.
that? So we ended up making loads of little envelopes and pinning them and sticking them all over her clothes, and she loved it.
Wow.
But
Yeah, yeah.
you don't know where it comes from often.
No.
It just
No,
comes,
so, I mean, we're talking about this. Sometimes photo shoots, they can evolve so much within an hour, can't they? You get a you might get a lighting setting wrong, and then
Yeah,
you look at it and go, actually, this looks amazing. Let's
yeah,
go
yeah.
with it. I love when it takes a different journey. Do you?
Yeah.
If you
Well,
know what I mean?
I was on a shoot last week or a couple of weeks ago with October London, who's a
Right.
new R&B artist that's been signed to Death Row,
Oh yeah, you're saying that. Yeah, I remember.
and he was amazing, and I literally did the photo shoot, the press shoot, in about 15 minutes,
Wow.
and
Because you knew
I
you
got it.
got it.
I knew I
Yeah,
got
yeah.
it. It was in
When
the
you know, you
bag.
know. Yeah,
It looked amazing,
yeah.
and I mean, they're talking about it might be on the front cover of Forbes or something,
Oh
and
wow. Oh, it's
I
amazing,
don't know
mate.
how it will be used, but
Yeah.
it will be. It's great, and I think again, it's the confidence, isn't it? I don't want to drag out those shoots anymore with where you're 4 hours in and everybody's a bit fed up and tired and wants to go home.
Well, listen, Mr. Lopez, it's been brilliant to speak to you. Can you what like the north things I normally say is socials to push? Anything you want to tell the listeners?
Instagram, C Lopez Photography,
Yeah.
at C Lopez Photography. Website is clopezphotography.com. Facebook, Chris Lopez. And yeah, thanks for having me, Dan Reed.
No worries. No worries.
And
Well, I
wishing
just
you
wanted to...
all the very best
Thank
with
you very
your
much.
future career. I'm very proud of you, mate, because
Oh, thanks, mate.
you're
Thank
an
you.
amazing photographer,
Oh,
and
thanks, dude.
I'm really honoured to have played a little part in that.
Oh, brilliant. Well, look, thanks for coming today. Just guys, this is my second one, so just please follow Frame the Beat on Instagram. It's Frame the Beat Podcast. Facebook's Frame the Beat Podcast. I think YouTube is Frame the Beat Podcast. Basically, Frame the Beat Podcast. So if you could follow, subscribe, like it, hopefully you do, and we will see you on the next one. See you later. See you, Chris.